The dog stopped cold beneath the rusted red slide. His hackles rose. Wind tugged at the swings, pushing them just enough to creak. It was a quiet park, tucked behind the church where no one came anymore. Except this morning, Thor, Deputy Hollis's aging K9, wouldn't budge. His nose hovered near the dirt, trembling. Then came the low growl, the kind Hollis hadn't heard since the Carson case. A growl that meant something wasn't right. The small town of Bellwood had long buried its secrets, but this dog had just sniffed one out. Bellwood had never been known for crime, not real crime. The occasional drunk and disorderly at the fishing derby, sure. A domestic gone loud enough for the neighbors to peek through the blinds. But murder? That wasn't Bellwood. At least, not officially. The sun was just cresting the tree line when Deputy Hollis pulled his cruiser up to the edge of the old church playground. Gravel crunched under the tires. His coffee sat untouched in the cup holder. Something about the call didn't sit right. Dispatch hadn't said much, just that Mrs. Carruthers, the pastor's widow, had seen a dog pacing the playground at dawn. Not just any dog. Thor. Hollis stepped out into the cool morning air. Bellwood always smelled like pine and river mist in the early hours. Peaceful, but Thor wasn't moving. He stood 10 feet ahead, locked in place, eyes fixed on the base of the slide, like it was a fresh kill. Thor, Hollis called. "Hey, buddy." The German shepherd flicked his ear, but didn't move. Hollis walked closer, boots soft against the wet grass. The slide was faded metal. Paint chipped down to bare rust in places. Kids hadn't played here in years. After the church stopped holding summer programs, the swing set and monkey bars had become skeletons in the weeds. Thor's nose twitched again. He whined, then lowered himself to the ground, paws extended, nose pointed directly beneath the slide platform. Hollis followed his gaze. There, half buried in the dirt, was a small strip of something pale. At first glance, it looked like paper, but when Hollis crouched and brushed it with gloved fingers, the truth clicked into place with a cold thud in his chest. Fabric, frayed, weather-stained, faintly floral, and clinging to it, just barely, was a patch of dark red. Hollis stood fast and scanned the lot. The old church loomed behind them. Quiet. Across the lot, the cemetery stretched down toward the riverbank. It was still early, and no one else was around. Thor was back on his feet now, tail low, eyes searching. "Dispatch," Hollis muttered into his radio. "This is Deputy Hollis. I need a forensic team at the old church playground off Route 7. Possible evidence recovery. And call Sheriff Ballard. He'll want to see this." 10-4. Hollis turned back to Thor, who now paced tight, anxious circles near the slide. The old dog had been through 6 cases with Hollis. He'd saved his life twice. But this was different. There was something deep in the dog's eyes Hollis hadn't seen in years. Fear. Sheriff Clay Ballard arrived 40 minutes later, his Ford squealing to a stop in the gravel. He stepped out, jaw clenched, already chewing a toothpick. "Talk to me." Hollis nodded toward the flag site beneath the slide. Thor found a piece of fabric. Looked like it was buried shallow. We called it crime scene. Waiting on results, but... Ballard squinted. "You think it's hers?" "I think it could be." The sheriff didn't say her name. Neither did Hollis. Around Bellwood, you didn't say it out loud. Nina Burrows. Gone 3 years this October. Last seen walking home from her shift at Jerry's Diner. Never made it back. No witnesses. No camera footage. Just her name in the papers and the hollowed-out wreckage of her mother's face. The case went cold before the first snowfall. Ballard rubbed his temple. "You sure Thor wasn't just spooked by a coyote or something?" Hollis frowned. "He's never false alerted. Not once. He was trained by Foley and Quantico. If he's signaling, there's a reason." Ballard sighed. "Hell." A breeze rustled the dead leaves clinging to the slide. One of the swings twisted gently on its chain. The sheriff crossed the slide and stood beneath it, scanning the dirt, the weeds, the curve of trees that bordered the back fence. "You ever wonder why nobody searched here?" Hollis asked. Ballard didn't look back. No one ever thought this place mattered. No cameras. No direct path from town. Just an old playground behind a dead church. Who the hell would bring a body here? Hollis looked down at the ground again. Someone who knew the town, who knew no one would come looking here. By the afternoon, word had spread. The recovery team found more beneath the dirt. Bone fragments, a girl's hair tie, a piece of jewelry with a cracked heart-shaped charm that Nina's mother later confirmed belonged to her daughter. The forensic techs boxed everything up and sent it off for analysis, but everyone knew what they'd found. Hollis stood outside the tape and watched it unfold. Thor sitting quietly beside him, panting hard. And that should have been the end of it. A breakthrough, closure. But it wasn't, because as they were wrapping up, Hollis's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He nearly ignored it. Then he picked up. The voice on the other end was quiet, male, shaky. "I know who brought her there," the man said, "but I can't talk on the phone." Hollis stood straighter. "Who is this?" "I'll meet you. I'll prove it. Tonight. But not alone. Bring the dog. Please." Click. That night, the rain came. Not heavy, just a fine mist that soaked everything without a sound. Hollis drove the back road out past Langford's mill, Thor pacing the rear cage in tight circles. The location the man gave was strange, an old shed out behind the firewood yard near Hollow Creek. There was no address, just a direction. Follow the gravel until the road ends. Hollis parked near the split-rail fence and stepped out, flashlight in hand. Thor leapt down, nose already working. The shed was barely standing, weather-beaten wood. Sagging door, vines curling up the sides like veins. Hollis pushed the door open slowly. Inside, a lantern flickered. And beside it, sitting on an overturned bucket, was Eddie Malone. Hollis's gut twisted. "You gotta be kidding me." Eddie looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, his beard patchy, wet from the rain. He was shaking, a bottle of something tucked in his coat. "You called me?" Hollis asked, stepping inside. Thor stayed at the doorway, growling low. Eddie nodded. "I did. I wasn't gonna. But that dog, he was barking at the slide today, right?" Hollis stared. "How do you know that?" Eddie's hands trembled as he lit a cigarette with the lantern's flame. "Because I saw what happened. That night, with the girl. You told the sheriff you were out of town." "I lied." Silence stretched. Eddie looked away, voice breaking. "I saw her get in the truck." "What truck?" "Black Chevy. Mud tires. Missing the back left hubcap. Same one Calvin Boone drives." Hollis's breath hitched. "Calvin Boone?" Eddie nodded slowly. "He was meeting someone that night. I don't know who, but they fought. He pushed her. She screamed. Then he dragged her back toward the church." "You saw all that and never said a word?" "I was high. I'd just broken into Jensen's shop and taken a bunch of pills. I figured no one would believe me anyway." Hollis stepped forward, fist clenched. "And now, I saw your dog on the news. Saw him at the slide. And I couldn't sleep. It's been eating me alive." Outside, the rain intensified. Thor growled louder. And then, suddenly the dog lunged. Not at Eddie, but out the door. Hollis turned just in time to see a figure disappear into the trees, boots thudding through the soaked brush. "Stay down." Hollis barked to Eddie as he drew his weapon and followed the K-9 into the woods. But whoever was had a head start, and they knew these woods better than Hollis did. 20 minutes later, they found nothing. No footprints worth tracking. No scent Thor could hold on to. Just broken branches. A cigarette but still warm, and a quiet feeling of being watched from deeper in the trees. Hollis returned to the shed furious. Eddie was gone. So was the lantern. Only the rain remained, dripping through the holes in the roof like quiet tears. And across the soaked dirt floor, the faintest footprint, leading out toward the road. Not Eddie's. A boot. Large. Deep. Heavy. Too clean for someone who'd just run through the woods. Hollis crouched low and stared. He recognized that tread. And suddenly it all made sense. The killer hadn't panicked. He had listened. Watched. And when the dog barked at the slide that morning, he realized the game was finally over. Rain hit the windshield in soft, steady waves as Hollis sat in his cruiser, staring out across the cemetery road. Thor sat silent in the passenger seat, breathing shallow, eyes locked forward. No sign of Eddie Malone. He'd vanished, again. Sheriff Ballard's voice crackled through the radio. Any update on the lead? Hollis hesitated. Eddie's gone. Someone else was there, watching. Possibly Boone. A pause. You saying Calvin Boone was at the scene? I can't prove it, Hollis said, but he knew we were getting close. He ran before we could see his face. Ballard let out a tired breath. Boone's been clean for a year. Runs a hardware store now. You want to go poking into that again, you better be sure. Town will eat you alive if you're wrong. Hollis looked at Thor, still frozen. He hadn't moved since they left the woods. I'm sure. Then don't do a damn thing until we talk tomorrow, Ballard said. You hear me? No cowboy moves. Click. Hollis didn't answer. He turned off the ignition and stared to the mist, heart pounding slow and heavy. Because there was one thing he hadn't told the sheriff. The footprint by the shed. It matched the boots Calvin Boone had worn every Sunday to the VFW barbecue for the last 5 years. And Hollis knew that because they'd once stood side by side at Nina Burroughs' funeral. The Boone family name went way back in Bellwood. Old money. Quiet influence. Calvin's father ran the sawmill that used to be the town's main employer. After it shut down, Calvin started doing odd jobs. Plumbing. Roofing. Then the store. People liked him. He had the charm. Smiled too easily. Talked slow. Helped seniors with their bags without being asked. But to Hollis, Calvin always felt like a man holding his breath, waiting for something. It was nearly 8:30 when Hollis parked across from a Boone family house. Big 2-story ranch. Porch swing. Wind chimes. Christmas lights still hanging even though it was July. He turned to Thor. If I'm wrong, we're going home. Thor didn't blink. Rain tapped gently on the roof. Hollis crossed the road, boots sinking into the muddy gravel. The porch light flicked on as he reached the steps. Then Calvin Boone opened the door. He was barefoot, shirt wrinkled, holding a mug of coffee like it was just another Wednesday night. His eyes scanned the driveway, then landed on Hollis. Evening, deputy. Everything all right? Need a minute of your time. Calvin stepped back. Come in. Dry off. You want coffee? Hollis hesitated, then stepped inside. The house smelled like cedar and cheap air freshener. Family photos lined the walls. The living room was neat, too neat. Couch cushions placed perfectly. No clutter. Thor patted him behind him, moving slow, head low. You said you weren't at the house last night, Hollis said quietly. Calvin raised an eyebrow. No, I was home, watching the baseball game. Why? You mind telling me why your boot prints were found out near Hollow Creek this morning? Calvin froze. The air between them turned stiff. Out by the firewood yard. Yeah, right outside a shed where Eddie Malone disappeared, after telling me something about a truck. Calvin chuckled, but it was dry, forced. That guy, he's high more than he's not. Doesn't mean he's lying. Calvin's gaze shifted to Thor, who had stopped dead in the middle of the room. He was growling now, barely audible, eyes fixed on the far wall. What's wrong with your dog? Calvin asked. Hollis didn't answer. He followed Thor's gaze, toward the fireplace. More specifically, toward a metal bin beside it, full of old firewood. Thor stepped closer, then barked. Once. Loud. Sharp. Calvin flinched. Mind if I take a look? Hollis asked, voice low. It's just wood, Calvin said. Nothing in there. Let me see. Calvin hesitated, and that's when Hollis saw it. Not the wood, the rug beneath the bin. It was off-center, shifted. The legs of the table behind it weren't aligned. Something had been moved recently. Back up, Hollis said. Calvin's eyes narrowed. You need a warrant. Then you won't mind if I wait right here while I call one in. Thor growled again, stepping forward. Calvin's hand twitched. Then he smiled. You know what I think, deputy? I think you're desperate. That girl's mama's been crying for answers for years. And now you think barking dogs and junkie stories make a case. Hollis didn't respond. He stepped forward and knelt beside the bin. And there, beneath the lowest log, plastic, torn, a zipper, he reached in slowly and pulled out what looked like a black duffel bag, crusted with mud and soot. Calvin moved. Too fast. He lunged, not toward Hollis, but toward Thor. But Thor was ready. The dog sank his teeth into Calvin's forearm with a roar that filled the house. Calvin screamed, swung wildly, but Thor held fast. Hollis surged forward and wrestled him down, cuffing him to the floor. Calvin writhed, face twisted, blood dripping to the tile. "I didn't kill her," he shouted. "You don't understand." Hollis pulled the duffel fully into the light. Inside were clothes. Women's clothes. Jeans. A pale blue sweater. A cracked heart-shaped necklace. Nina's. And beneath them, fresh, a folded piece of paper. Handwritten. Nina's journal entry. Dated October 3rd. The night she vanished. At the station, Sheriff Ballard stared at the evidence laid out on the table, like he was looking at a ghost. "You sure?" he asked. Hollis nodded. Thor hit on the bag. "The necklace matches. And the journal entry says she was meeting someone that night, a man who'd promised to help her leave town. She never names him, but she says he scared her." "Boone. Looks that way. The handwriting's hers." Her mom confirmed it. Ballard rubbed his temples. "And Eddie Malone? Still missing. Maybe dead. Maybe hiding." Ballard sighed. "And what the hell do we do now?" Hollis looked down at Thor, who sat beside the desk like a statue, waiting. "We take him down." 2 days later, Calvin Boone stood in front of the county judge and said not guilty. His lawyer claimed the evidence was planted. The jury didn't believe him. But it wasn't the clothes or the journal that buried him. It was the boots. The crime lab matched the tread from Hollow Creek. Exactly. Traces of Nina's blood were found on one of the laces. And the kicker, Boone's fingerprints were on the zipper of the duffel. He'd kept the bag all this time. For 3 years. Hidden. Buried. Waiting. When asked why, he said nothing. When the sentence came down, life without parole, he didn't blink. He just smiled. That night, Hollis drove out to the playground again. The rain had finally stopped. The slide was still there, rusted and silent. The swings creaked gently in the wind. Thor trotted ahead, stopping at the base of the slide again. But this time, he didn't growl. He sat and slowly lowered his head to the dirt, like he was saying goodbye. Hollis knelt beside him and looked up at the sky, where the clouds had finally broken. Stars shimmered through. And somewhere far off, a mother was sleeping for the first time in years. 3 weeks after the arrest, Bellwood started to feel different, quieter, but not in the peaceful way. It was as if something heavy had been lifted, yet another weight had taken its place. The headlines read like a victory. Local deputy, K9 crack cold case, Boone sentence in Burroughs case. But people weren't celebrating. They were watching each other closer, wondering what else might come crawling out from under the town's skin now that one secret had been dragged into daylight. Hollis sat on his porch most nights, drinking lukewarm coffee. Thor curled at his feet. The dog was aging. His legs moved slower. His eyes clouded more often. But he was still sharp, still alert. And that day at the slide had changed something in both of them. The past didn't stay buried in Bellwood. And the ground beneath the playground had more to give. It was a Wednesday morning when Hollis got the call. The church groundskeeper had found something strange near the cemetery fence line. Fresh dirt disturbed around the roots of an old tree. Thor hadn't been there in days. Yet something about the timing felt wrong. Like the killer had buried more than guilt. He pulled up 20 minutes later, stepping out into thick morning fog. The air was heavy with moisture, the kind that made your skin feel watched. The fence was still rusted and bent where kids used to crawl through during hide and seek. But the patch the man pointed to, it wasn't a game. Hollis crouched low. The dirt was dark, soft, not from rain, from being turned. He reached down and peeled back a loose clump. Beneath it, wrapped in plastic, was a manila envelope. He stared at it, heart ticking in his ears. Gently he opened it. Inside, photographs. Dozens. Some in color, some faded and yellow. All of them taken without permission, behind gas stations, inside diners, through bedroom windows. Young women, some he recognized, faces from missing posters long gone. Some he didn't, but one photo stopped his breath cold. It was Nina, smiling, standing outside Jerry's diner, her apron stained with grease. Behind her in the photo, just barely visible in the reflection of the diner's window, a man, not Calvin Boone, someone else. Hollis stood in the sheriff's office with the photographs fanned out across the desk. Ballard stared at them like they were ghosts. "This isn't Boone," Hollis said. "He's in half of these pictures with Nina. But the man in the reflection, look at the build, the haircut, that's not him." Ballard didn't move. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" he asked finally. "I think Boone wasn't working alone." The sheriff sat back hard, rubbing his hands over his face. "God help us." The man in the reflection had been edited out in some prints, cropped or blurred. It was deliberate. Whoever had buried those photos had gone through the trouble of trying to erase someone. But they missed one. Hollis enhanced it. Facial reconstruction software gave him just enough. It was someone local, someone close. The photo showed a man in uniform, not police, security, and not just anywhere, church security. Back when the congregation had been large enough to justify a budget, Hollis found the old rosters buried in town records, dusty and forgotten. And there he was, Simon Cray, soft-spoken, never married, no record. No one really remembered much about him. But he'd been assigned to the church grounds in 2019, the same year Nina vanished. Simon Cray lived in a cabin deep in the woods, off a dirt road most folks forgot existed. His mailbox was rusted, name barely legible. Hollis parked 100 yards back and approached on foot, Thor at his side. The trees were dense here, claustrophobic, like they knew what had been done between them. The house came into view slowly, with siding, a warped roof, and a door that hung crooked. No lights, no car out front. But Thor stopped, growled, again, like he had that first morning. Hollis stepped carefully, hand on his holster. Thor moved to the side of the house, nose twitching. There, beneath a boarded-up window, was a pile of disturbed leaves. Hollis brushed them aside. A trapdoor, small, hidden, padlocked. He called in, waited for backup, but time slowed. And Thor wasn't waiting. He barked, once, twice, then clawed at the lock. When they finally pried it open, the stench hit first, like rot and chemicals. They descended one by one, and what they found beneath the cabin was more than a root cellar. It was a shrine. Photos, clothing, shoes, locks of hair labeled in jars. Not just Nina. 7 girls. Boone hadn't acted alone. He'd been covering for someone, or worse, collecting for them. The final horror was the journal, handwritten in cramped script. Simon's, a confession in pieces. He wrote about gathering angels, about keeping them safe, about the gifts Boone brought him. One line stuck with Hollis. "I would never hurt them. I only watched. He was a knife. I was the eye." The fallout shattered Bellwood. Boone never admitted it, but the evidence from Simon's cellar sealed the case. Thor had sniffed the truth long before they ever saw it. Boone was a hand. Simon Cray was the reason, a quiet man, invisible in a town that stopped looking after the first scream. Weeks passed. The press came and went, but Hollis stayed. So did Thor, until one morning the dog didn't rise. He lay on the porch, still as stone, head resting beside his favorite worn tennis ball. Hollis knelt beside him, tears streaming silently down his face. "Good boy," he whispered. "Good boy." The town planted a tree beside the slide, put up a brass plaque beneath it. It read, "In memory of Thor, he found the truth when no one else could." Kids play there again now. Their laughter rises through the trees. And every time Hollis walks by, he feels something shift in his chest. Not pain, not grief, but gratitude. Because sometimes it takes more than men to solve a crime. Sometimes it takes a dog that refuses to move, a dog that growls at ghosts, a dog that leads you to the place the truth was buried and won't let you turn away. Epilogue 100 words. Bellwood healed slow, but it healed. The church reopened its doors. The swings were oiled, the slide repainted, and though many would forget the horrors buried beneath it, one name remained in every heart. Thor, the dog who stopped at a slide and smelled something no one else could, who brought down a killer, who forced open the eyes of a town that had long refused to see. And in that silence where he once barked, the truth still echoes. If you were moved by this story, consider subscribing for more human-driven thrillers just like it. Your support helps us keep digging.